This video is part of an 11-part series that'll be going up on my channel for the next month and a bit, during which I'm going to lay out the top 10 players at every position, culminating in my second top 100 NPB players video. If you're here from day one, welcome, and if you're joining me further down the line, the playlist for these videos will be in the description. Feel free to skip this bit if you've already seen one of these videos, because this part will be the same for every video. These players will be ranked using a similar system to the one I used in my first top 100 video like 2 years ago. First, you take a player's average wins above replacement per season, then multiply that by their 7-year peak WAR to give you a points score. A player will have had to play at least 5 years in NPB to qualify for this list, unless they are a DH, in which case it's 4. Why so low? Well, I wanted to include both foreign players and players that are currently playing in NPB. Unlike last time, however, I will not be penalizing domestic players who barely played in their first couple seasons in NPB, as it isn't really a player's fault if they were called up before they were ready. However, seasons at an end of a player's career in which they did not play much but still tried to hold on will count against their score. Why am I ranking them like this? Well, I dislike subjective rankings and wanted a way of making an objective ranking without just ranking players by wins above replacement, which anyone can do if they know where to look. Speaking of, all the data from 1936 to 2022 comes courtesy of NPBstats.com, and anything from 2023 and 2024 comes from Deltagraphs. Both sites use the Fangraphs WAR model. With that formality out of the way, let's jump into it. Second base is a relatively underappreciated position in baseball. For most players, it is not their first choice. Most want to be shortstops, or at the very least third baseman. If you're a career second baseman, there seems to be this idea that you have some kind of fatal flaw that prevents you from jumping to the other side of the infield. Either your glove is not good enough for shortstop, or your arm is not good enough for third. But this also makes the position a refuge for good hitters who, for some reason, are locked out of first base, which probably explains the amount of foreign players who've started the position over the decades. Still, those who make it their own, make it their own. They're proud of their place in the middle infield, and they do their job to the best of their ability. And for that, we should applaud them. So we will. These are the top 10 second basemen in NPB history. Born and raised in the Tokyo suburb of Higashi Yamato, Ryosuke Kikuchi has been, quite simply, the best defender of the 2010s. Although he moved to Nagano for high school, he wasn't able to make Koshien and thus went unnoticed. He would join the relatively small Chukyo Gakuen University in Gifu, and the smaller league helped him stand out from the crowd, earning him a second-round pick from the Hiroshima Carp in 2011. After breaking out in 2013, Kikuchi would win 10 consecutive Gold Gloves from 2013 to 2022. In just his third NPB season in 2014, he set the record with 535 assists. As the Carp steadily got better, Kikuchi did too, becoming the key piece of a team that steadily built itself into the juggernaut of the late 2010s, winning their first pennant in 25 years in 2016. Despite being surrounded by the likes of Seiya Suzuki, Yoshihiro Maru, and Takahiro Arai, you could make the case that Kikuchi was the MVP of that 2016 Carp squad. Not only did he lead the Central League in hits and put up a career-high 119 WRC+, but he also had an RDEF of 29.1, which is, by a wide margin, the record for second baseman in NPB. Kikuchi remains a core piece of the Carp even up to today, even after a failed posting attempt where he got no interest from MLB clubs. In 2020, he would become the only qualified player to never make a single error in a season. What makes that doubly impressive is the fact that elite defenders like Kikuchi often get less leeway from scorers when they do mess up. But he was still perfect. While his career is winding down in his late 30s, Ryosuke Kikuchi will remain a Hiroshima Carp legend. Before Shohei Ohtani was the best player to come out of Iwate Prefecture, that title belonged to Choei Shirazaka. Born in the small town of Ichinohe, Shirazaka would originally work for Sendai's Rail Bureau, playing corporate ball for the company team. After the war, he'd returned to Sendai, and his prowess ended up getting noticed by the defending JPBL champions, the Osaka Tigers. They took note of his great defense and signed him on in 1948. While it would take a couple years to get going, after the great exodus of Tiger stars in 1950, Shirazaka would take over at second base and not look back, hitting a career-high 18 homers thanks to the rabbit ball, as well as playing solid defense. While he would move to shortstop for a couple years, while he was there, he would have the greatest defensive season in NPB history, with an RDEF of 40.6 while putting up a career-high 123 WRC+. All that accumulated in an 8.5 WAR campaign, which was the best by any Iwate-born player until 2016. But after Yoshio Yoshida joined the team, Shirasaka would move back to second, where he continued to dominate defensively for the next 5 years. The Tigers' middle infielders got the nickname the Impenetrable Wall thanks to their exploits. However, age and injuries would finally catch up to him, and he'd retire after only playing 10 games in 1958. Shirasaka is another player whose status as an analytical darling has seen him get rediscovered in recent years, and remains an all-time great defensively. Gordon Lee Bloomfield, better known as Jack, had one of the weirder paths to NPB stardom. Hailing from the tiny town of Monte Alto, Texas, and originally signing with the unaffiliated Harlingen Capitals after graduating from the University of Texas in 1955, he would soon catch the attention of the Milwaukee Braves. After a couple years in the Braves system, he would be traded to the Reds system, then the Pirates system, then the A's system. Then the Portland Beavers lost their affiliation, and the A's didn't take Bloomfield with them. Despite utterly tearing up AAA, Bloomfield was viewed as too lazy to make it in MLB. So his friend Ron Bottler called him up and asked him to come to Osaka. Registered as just Bloom to save space, Jack would immediately slot in as the Kintetsu Buffaloes' starting second baseman. While he had some troubles with pitches in the middle of the plate, he would absolutely feast on outside pitches. Opponents like Hall of Famers Isao Harimoto and Katsuya Nomura admitted to watching Bloomfield a lot more closely to try and figure out how he did it, greatly improving their own batting in the process. In 1962, Bloomfield would set the Kintetsu Buffaloes record by batting .374, while also putting up a .994 OPS. While he only hit 12 homers, he still had a .179 WRC+. He would make that back-to-back batting titles in 1963. Bloomfield would join the Hawks in 1965, but would retire after the 1966 season. Despite his great play, Bloom is often considered to be one of the forgotten foreign stars, mainly because during his peak, the Buffaloes were bad. Like, really bad. There's a lot of debate around who the first foreign superstar in NPB was. Some say it's Larry Raines, who still holds the PL foreign player hits record, but others say he didn't play long enough. Some say it's Chico Barbone, but his hitting left a lot to be desired. I'd say it's a different Hunky Brave, Darryl Spencer. After a decade in MLB with the Giants, Cardinals, Dodgers, and Reds, the Hunky Braves would sign Spencer in 1964 to replace Barbone at second base. Spencer would immediately slot into the role and become one of the faces of the ascendant Braves. He even challenged for a Triple Crown in 1965, before he was directly sabotaged by his opponent for that Triple Crown, Katsuya Nomura. Regardless, a motorcycle crash would effectively end Spencer's chances anyways. Spencer was so prolific that when the Braves finally made their first Japan series in 1967, he was considered the face of the club. So much so that he was one of the primary antagonists in the baseball anime Ace of the Giants in their arc covering the 1967 Japan series. His 209 WRC+ in 1965 is still a Bees franchise record, and it would be 20 years before another foreign player put up a season of that caliber. His analytical approach to hitting would also see him take on the nickname Dr. Baseball. Spencer would retire at the end of the 1968 season, but after a year where he faced some post-playing days financial troubles, he would ask the Braves to come back as a player-coach, to which they gladly accepted. Spencer has the dubious honor of being the foreign player who made the most Japan Series finals without winning one, as his Braves would fall to the V9 4 times. Nicknamed the Headliner, Isami Okamoto actually grew up playing basketball, not baseball, but as he reached high school in the 1940s, his short and lanky frame led him to switch to baseball. After starting for Kyoto Technical High School, he'd signed with the Nankai Hawks in 1949. Okamoto wouldn't get any playing time that year, and only played 13 games in 1950. But after Nankai sent him down to get reps in their corporate ball club, Okamoto would finally be able to start, and he came out swinging in 1952. Okamoto emerged as one of the best offensive second basemen in NPB, and after a painful loss to the Giants in the 1952 Japan series, he'd come back even stronger the next year. 19 homers, a 160 WRC+, and 6.5 WAR. It was here that he earned his nickname, as he would take home PL MVP as the Hawks won another pennant. Throughout the 1950s, Okamoto was the face of the Hawks, While he wouldn't be as good offensively as in 53, his above-average power for the time and his excellent defense were a driving force behind the Hawks' success throughout the decade. When they finally won their first Japan series in 1959, Okamoto would again be front and center. But that wouldn't be the case much longer. See, he'd been playing hurt, and with his mission finally accomplished, it's like his body gave up. Carlton Honta would take away his spot in the starting lineup in 1960, and in 1961, Okamoto would miss the entire season due to injuries. After struggling along for 2 more years, he would finally retire and embark on a long coaching career. In the early 1970s, the Taiyo Whales had a problem. They were absolutely sick and tired of their rotten luck with over-the-hill foreign players. So they resolved to go for a younger player. And luckily for them, there was a 24-year-old second baseman in the Padres system who was looking for a way out. John Shippen had largely fixed his issues with hitting, but the Padres hadn't called him back up, so he saw the Whales as the perfect out. He immediately captivated Whales fans with his attitude. He dressed like a hippie, had a general disdain for any authority that wasn't teammate Cletus Boyer, and he generally thought he was hot shit. But see, the thing is, he was. Shippen was pretty much the best second baseman in NPB in the 1970s, and arguably made the position relevant for the first time in over a decade. Sure, Shozo Doi, Morimichi Takagi, and Hiroyuki Yamazaki had been good, but Shippen was just that much better. He could hit, and he could defend. In fact, his 34 homers in 1975 was the CL record for second baseman until 1999. With a back injury limiting his play and no Boyer around to translate for management, Shippen would be traded to the Yomiuri Giants for cash in 1978. Some expected this to be the end of Shippen's career, as he would rally against the Giants' dress code and gentlemanly reputation. But he didn't, because he was close friends with Giants manager Shigeo Nagashima. Unfortunately, Shippen's career would end prematurely, when he slumped in 1980 and was let go thanks to the foreign player limits. Nowadays, he would have lost his foreign player status thanks to how long he'd been in the league. Still, Shippen's legacy as the best NPB second baseman of the 70s is well and truly secure. Born and raised in Osaka and drafted fresh out of Osaka Toen High School by the Saitama Seibu Lions in 2008, following their 13th Japan Series title, it would take a couple years for Hideto Asamura to get going, but when he finally broke out for real in 2013, there was no stopping him. Since 2015, there have been few players as consistently good as Hideto Asamura. As the Lions slowly got back into form in the 2010s, Asamura was one of the faces of a new Lions team that looked like they were going to re-emerge as the Kings of the Pacific League. Except they didn't. But still, Asamura was consistently a great bat that often competed for the RBI title thanks to the sheer offensive prowess of his club. In 2018, he'd have a career year as the Lions finished first for the first time in a decade, with his 127 RBI being the most ever by a PL second baseman, as well as being a Lions franchise record. But then he hit free agency. If there's one thing the Lions have been really bad at since their last Japan Series victory, it's free agency. For the second time in as many years, the Lions would lose a core piece to the Tohoku Rakuten Golden Eagles. Since 2019, Asamura has been the offensive face of a very bipolar Eagles club, largely because he is the only consistent part of that offense. While he's largely moved off second base and into a DH role these past couple years, Asamura continues to assemble a Hall of Fame career as one of the best second basemen of his generation. After a decade of mediocrity and changing their name, the Yokohama Bay Stars decided to refresh their foreign core using the same method they'd used in 1970. Get some young guys with big league experience who are frustrated by their current situation in MLB. So they grabbed a 25-year-old second baseman from the Angels named Bobby Rose. Rose stepped in and immediately put up a 150 WRC+ in his first year in NPB, winning the RBI title and being named to the best 9. Surely this was the start of a long, fruitful career, right? Well, see, people soon realized why the Angels had been so reluctant to play him. He couldn't exactly field all that well. From 1994 to 1996, he was the worst defensive middle infielder in NPB. He wouldn't match his rookie NPB season until 1997, by which time he'd mostly sorted out his defensive issues and would become the anchor of what became known as the machine gun offense. In 1998, he was a core piece of the franchise's second Japan Series championship, starting the 4-6-3 double play that clinched it. The next year, as the ball started to finally fly again, he'd catch fire. 369, 37 homers, a franchise record 153 RBI, and a CL record 192 hits. Roberto Perugini and Hideki Matsui would prevent him from winning a Triple Crown, but it was still one of the best offensive seasons of the era. While he would obviously take a step back in 2000, he was still the face of the BayStars. Small problem, the BayStars didn't want to pay him like he was the face of the franchise, so he left in a huff. He would attempt to come back in 2003 with the Marines, but retired for good before the season after deciding that his heart wasn't in it anymore. Regardless, Rose remains one of the best foreign players in NPB history. Born in Saijo, Ehime, and raised in Matsuyama, Shigeru Chiba, aka The Bull, would join the Giants as a fresh-faced 18-year-old in 1938. He was originally supposed to sign with the Kurakuin Eagles, but the Giants had swooped in and used their influence with some powerful people in Matsuyama to sway him over. Such underhanded tactics didn't sit well with the Eagles, so Chiba's father would travel to Tokyo with him to profusely apologize. Chiba would prove that he'd been worth fighting over almost immediately, as he was elite on both sides of the ball from pretty much day one, regularly putting up a WRC plus in the 150s while being the best defensive second baseman around. Chiba would spend the war as a corporal, nearly getting sent to Borneo before the Giants managed to use their influence to get him yanked away from his unit and sent back to his home island of Shikoku. The ship he would have been on was later sunk with all hands. Returning to the Giants in 1946, he would pick up pretty much right where he left off, only his defense got even better because during the war he spent his downtime reading Sotaro Suzuki's book on baseball tactics. For the next decade, he would anchor the Giants' middle infield, being named to the best nine 7 years in a row, but injuries in 1956 would force him to retire. The Kintetsu Buffaloes would be named in reference to him in 1958 when he took over as manager, and that name still exists today as Orix kept it during the merger. He would be inducted into the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame in 1980. NPB has never seen a 40-40 season. Because of that, their ultimate all-around offensive achievement is called the Triple 3, a 30-30 season where a player also bats 300. Only one guy has done it multiple times. His name is Tetsuro Yamada, and he did it, fittingly, 3 times. A first-round runoff pick in 2010 out of Riseisha High School in Osaka, Yamada joined a Swallows squad that had been reeling from losing their biggest stars of the 2000s one after another. But that meant that he was primed to be their future. And in 2014, he broke out big. 324, 29 homers, a 149 WRC+, 6.7 WAR. How does one top that? Simple. The greatest season by any NPBer in the 2010s. While no one has put up a 12 WAR campaign since 1963, Yamada came the closest out of anyone. Not only did he handily put up a triple 3, but he also beat out Ryosuke Kikuchi as the best defensive second baseman in the CL. He nearly single-handedly took that offense to the 2015 CL pennant, and while they would easily be manhandled by the Hawks in the Japan series, there was a new face of the Central League. 2 more triple 3 seasons would follow in 2016 and 2018, and a 4th 30-30 season in 2019 solidified Yamada's legacy as a 5-tool legend, a legend that was cemented when he captained the Swallows to a Japan series in 2021. While Yamada has slowed down with age and can't really steal bases anymore, he remains a solid defender and plus bat who will undoubtedly be enshrined in the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame when all is said and done.